am on focus mode. I'd like to welcome everyone for coming to celebrate our Earth Day event this year, the Seattle Storytellers Guild's Earth Day event. Um, I would first like to do the land acknowledgement, and Barry is going to put up a little picture while I do this. We want to acknowledge that we live, work, play, and benefit from the bounties provided by, and so Barry, that made my thing disappear. So,
That's okay. They can see it.
Yeah.
You'll be there in a minute when I take it off.
What?
Go ahead.
I can't read it because
Oh, you can't read it?
No.
Oh, it's on the screen?
Mine is on my screen.
Okay. I will say before I take this down that I threatened to make Sheila pronounce all those names, but I'm being nice.
Or change. Thanks, Barry.
Come on. There we go.
Okay. And
okay, can you see it again?
Yes, I can. Thank you. So we want to acknowledge that we are on these lands of the indigenous peoples. The land not only covers the Northwest, our beautiful Northwest, but it covers all states in the United States. And some of the tribes are recognized by the federal government, and some tribes are not recognized, like the Duwamish. In the Northwest, we have indigenous peoples like the Chinook, the Colville, Hoh, Snoqualmie, Yakima, Spokane, Puyallup, and the Snohomish, Steilacoom, and Duwamish, and many other tribes that you saw on the picture that Barry had up for us. We want to acknowledge them all. As we honor Mother Earth today, let us also honor the indigenous peoples who cared for the land and its resources for thousands of years before our arrival. And now, I would like to welcome our guest for this evening to our annual Earth Day celebration. Miss Sheila Arnold is here with us, and she is a multi-talented person. And not only storyteller, but person. She has been a full-time storyteller since 2003. And has traveled all over the United States sharing stories of history, culture, religion, folk tales, and just plain old fun. Her historical characters take on a life of their own as they bring the audience into their true life experiences. In January of 2020, Sheila was honored to be a George Washington's Mount Vernon Research Fellow. And she used that opportunity to deepen her knowledge of the historical characters that she portrays. If you've had the opportunity to attend one of Sheila's events, you will have noticed that she loves telling stories. She loves people. And tonight, Sheila will show her love of our planet through the stories she has brought for us. Please hold your applause until the end of the program. You can do your silent waves if you like. But now, just sit back and enjoy Sheila Arnold.
Thank you so much, Eva. I'm so glad to be able to be here and to work with the Seattle Storytellers Guild. You all are doing so well, and it's just wonderful to see you growing and to see people coming to things. And I never worry about numbers. What I love is that you have consistent people that come, and that you have new people that take a chance and come, and that is lovely. I also want to put out a special thanks, a personal congratulations to Eva Abram on the receipt, being a recipient of the J.J. Renault Award. And I know that she is going to do even more amazing things than she does already. And I am so appreciative that Susie, Irwin, Barry McWilliams, and Brindle have worked with me to make all this happen. And so I come to you today from Portland, Oregon. I just left this morning from Berkeley, California, flew on the plane, took a great nap, and then woke up in time to be able to come and do this program. And I'm doing it from my phone. So if it looks like you can see part of the hotel room I'm in, it is because my laptop didn't work. So just so you know all the details behind everything. I thought since this is Earth Day, we would start we're celebrating Earth Day, that we would start in the most appropriate way. So here we go. Happy Earth Day to you. Happy Earth Day to me. Happy Earth Day to the flowers and the bees and the trees and the mountains and the seas and the fishes. And happy birthday to them and us if we keep a planet. Okay, that was my happy birthday one. Yes, indeed. So I hope that you will take that and you will make your own happy birthday to the Earth as long as it's around. I saw a wonderful tag the other day, and it was a bee. It had a bee on it. It says, "If we disappear, we're taking you with us." And I was like, okay, that's kind of intense. I love it. So I hope that you enjoy the stories and a couple of songs as we go and we celebrate and we think about our Earth in the way that we want to keep it for generations to come. I have a grandchild. I have two grandchildren, one that's 10 years old and the other that is a year and a couple of months, or not even a year and just over a month. And I look at the two of them and I really hope that they get a world where they can swim in the ocean, play in the lakes, and they can have grass under their feet. They can have trees that they can look at in majestic beauty. I really hope for a world that they will have that without having all the climate crisis of wildfires and floods and the major changes in the weather systems. I'm hoping that we don't have to have that. So in honor of my grandchildren, and if you have a grandchild, I'm hoping that I can't see your faces, else I would ask you to, and you can't talk in the chat right now, else I'd ask you to put your grandchildren's name in the chat, just because we're doing this in honor of our grandchildren, our children and grandchildren, and for ourselves, yes, but man, we want them to have more of what we've had. Speaking of children, here's a story. Once upon a time, and isn't that a great way to start a story? Once upon a time, there was a king. His queen had died many years before, and he raised his two sons. But raising his two sons was like raising two wolves. They constantly were vying for his attention. They constantly wanted to be the one in charge. They constantly were at each other's throats. Because of this, the king knew, as the boys grew older, the king knew not to leave the world without having specific instructions for his boys. And so in the will, and he told them this before he died, that the kingdom that they had, it was a kingdom that had two mountains, one on each side, large mountains, and then the valley was where the people lived. And up above, just a little bit above on a hill, above the people, that is where the castle was, the home they were raised in. And the father wrote that when he died, that the houses would be divided in half, and each boy would have one side of the mountain, and that would be how they would rule. And they were required to come together once a year back to the castle to discuss things, to remember their father and their mother, and to make the world better. When the father did die, the two boys were eager to take their side of the mountain. They were eager to leave the castle and very eager not to have to see each other for another year. Both boys were married and had families, and they both went to live in a house that they built above the village so they could look down. And the people looked up and trusted the two boys because they had loved the boy's father. Well, one day, one of the brothers, the brother that lived on this side of the mountain, he wanted a little bit more. He decided that he would go, he decided that he would go up the mountain a bit more. And behind his house, he would cut down some of the woods there, and he would build himself a large swimming pool. A swimming pool large enough for his family and for his prime minister's family, so that some of the ladies and lords and their families to come. But he would build this, and he redirected some of the water to come to where he was, so he would be able to have the water that was needed for the pool. Well, the other brother on this side of the mountain saw what his brother had done, and he would not be outdone. So he leveled out some of the land and took down some of the trees that were there, and he built himself an Olympic-sized swimming pool, much larger, and with many spaces on it, and 1 or 2 spas around it, so everyone could have their moment of heat and springs that were pumped in to help them. Well, this brother was not to be undone, certainly not. And so he went up higher on the mountain, and he leveled more of the mountain, and he moved out the trees, and he moved out the ground that was there, and he chopped the trees up, and some he gave as wood to others. Others he just burned. He just burned. And he built himself a 9-hole golf course. And he redirected more water, because a golf course is nothing without green. They do call it the greens for a reason. And so he made sure more water was diverted. And even when the people in the village began to complain that their water wasn't as fresh as it had been before, that it didn't come as quickly, he reminded them that he was the king and that he needed this so that he could entertain those who would come from other kingdoms, mostly his brothers. This brother was not to be undone. And so this brother, he leveled even more of the mountain above his house and above his Olympic-sized swimming pool, and he built himself an 18-hole golf course. And he invited, the finest of the golfers and all of the other kingdoms around. And he made a members only one, so none of the villagers could come. And of course, his brother couldn't come because he wasn't a member. And he made sure that there were sprinklers all around. And he even brought in particular plants to plant that weren't common to the area. And well, yes, one of the plants became a little invasive and began to take over some of the trees below and that were still around the town. But that was a minor thing and could be dealt with getting more people. But then the villagers in this brother's town began to complain. The animals were coming into the village. There have been sightings of bears and cougars. There have been sightings of wolves and coyotes, and they were afraid to let their children out in the evening. And the king heard them, but he said, "Never you mind. It will give me the opportunity to employ more of you. Some of you I will hire to go capture these animals and kill them dead. Dispose of their bodies how you may." And when some complained and said, "Well, shouldn't we at least move them?" It's like, that is too much work. And when it happened on the other mountain as well, the animals came. Well, this brother said the same. On that much, they at least agreed. It was better to employ people to take care of the animals than to take care of the animals. And the brothers, they continued. Now, this didn't happen in just 1 year. It happened over time and time and time. And every year when they came together, one of them would tell the other what they had done. They told each other everything they did, and it sent them away in such fury that they went back and they would build again. And this brother, having seen what happened to the other brother, he saw that 18-hole golf course, and he decided he and his family would move higher up the mountain so they could look down, and that their house would be higher so that his brother would have to look up and over at him. And so he leveled the top of the mountain. He leveled it, moving all of the trees. moving everything that had been there, not caring for the animals and not worried about rain or mud or ground or anything like that. He built himself a large, spacious house, one that could have fit 3 families, 4 maybe. But it was for him and his wife and his 2 children who were growing up and not going to be there very long. And out of the kindness of his heart, he gave his old house to the prime minister, who had 5 children. And so they definitively used everything in the house a lot. And for the house on top of the mountain, he made sure that water, the finest water, came to his mountain house first. And he made sure there was indoor plumbing of the best and most fashionable kind, and that they had all that they needed. He imported into his house, he imported ivory from the tusk of elephants, he always proclaimed. He had no problems at all bringing in avocados from the down in the Latin South America and pulling avocados off trees just so that he could have as much avocados as he wanted. And yes, he shared with some of his people. And he also determined that he would have palm oil and all the food. That is what they used. And he bragged about that to his brother when they met in that one year. And the other brother, he could barely stand to look at him. He said, "Well, I miss father, I miss mother. Can we leave now?" They both slept on different sides of that main castle and they left. And that other brother, he would not be undone. And he too raised all of the land and the trees that were there. And he built another house, a big house for his family and himself. And he made sure at the top of his house, there was a small tower, just slightly higher than his brother's house. So he could look down, just a tower for one, inlaid with gold that came from countries where they didn't take care of their miners, but he didn't care about that. And inside of the gold, he put diamonds. And when his son one day said, "Are those blood diamonds?" his father in the house said, "I hope so." Because he was proud he had more than his brother. A year passed and the 2 brothers came back together. And they came back into the house and they looked at each other across the table. One shared a memory of the father and the other one shared one to make himself look better. And the other one shared another until they were arguing, but their arguing was soon covered over by the thunder and lightning that had begun. There was a rain coming for sure, but they didn't worry about rain. They sat trying to argue over each other. Who had been better as a son? Who had been better as a builder? Who was better? That is what they argued. Who had more and what more could they do? And when the rains began in full, it was torrential. And the rains came down on the mountain and they could not find a place. They didn't have any trees to soak up the rain. There was nothing but land, but dirt. And so the mud began. And the boys were startled when they heard something that was louder than their own arguing. And they rushed out from the top room where they were at. They rushed out onto the patio and they looked in horror as on both sides of the mountain, the mud began to come down. By the time they looked, their own houses were already covered. And they knew that saving their wives and children was impossible. And the people in the village were looking below. They were looking and looking up and seeing what was happening. And they saw that the path of the mud was coming straight for the village. It would not hit the hill where the 2 boys were. call them boys. They were men that knew better. They played it boys to be better than each other. And this time, they both felt and saw the horror as the animals came rushing down the hills. And the people tried to run, and the screams. And the people turned. They turned to the castle. And it was the sight of the two boys men standing on the patio together, would be the last vision that most would ever see. And the two brothers stood and looked on the kingdom they had no more. Thank you. Thank you. I do hope you enjoyed that story. That story is an original story. I wrote that because in one of the first classes I did at a wonderful place called Common Ground on the Hill. It's an amazing, amazing program where artists of all kinds gather with people who are working on relevant issues, and together we connect. And we find our common ground, and we connect arts with relevant issues, and relevant issues connect with art. And I had in my first class I ever did, I had an environmentalist, and who said, I'm really good in the environment stuff. I can speak it real well. But when I go into somebody's office, they just tune me out. And I need a good story. I said, oh, you can just write a little story, you know? And he's like, about what? I was like, well, once upon a time, there were two brothers, and they had two mountains, and they cut the mountains down. He was like, how did you do that? And I'm like, I don't know, because I don't have the right words. You have the right words. He said, well, you did pretty good. He cut down the mountain like it was, you know, like he said, I'll use that story. And I said, well, can I use it too? And he said, yes. So and so that's a story. I just really love how that story makes me think and reminds me of what our own, when we only focus on ourselves, how much we give up in the end, you know? I was thinking about that this week. Somebody wrote about the destruction happening in Ukraine. If Putin would win, what would he get? What would he get? Blown up towns, lack of people. It just seems so foolish. But we can say that about ourselves. If we keep doing what we're doing, in the end, what will we get? Just a thing. Because this land is your land. And this land is my land. Oh, yeah. Oh, from California to the New York Island, from the redwood forest to the Gulf Stream waters. I tell you, this land was made for you and me. As I was walking down that ribbon of highway, I saw above me that endless skyway. Now I saw below me that golden valley. Oh, this land was for you and me. Well, as I was walking, I saw pollution beside me. And I didn't have the stars above to guide me. And there was smog and fog in that endless skyway. And I said, hey, this land is not for you and me. No, one bright sunny morning, I turned the TV on. Yes, I did. I heard them talking about more to come. We want more cars, more oil, more things to do it our way. And I said, one day the land will not be for you and me. Oh, this land is your land. This land is my land. From Riverside, California to Staten Island. It's the land of Seattle with a little Portland down below. I'm here to tell you, we don't take care of our land. There's nowhere to go. Oh, if we don't take care of this land, there's nowhere to go. And I tell you, this land is made for you and me. Oh, remember that this land is for you and me. Hopefully you jammed a little bit with that. And so this is one of those times I'd love to see you, but hopefully you jammed a little bit with that. And just remember how important, we love that song. This land is your land, it's a good Woody Guthrie song. It's great. But what will we have if we don't have this land? What do we get? Not much. Not much. This is the Aesop's fable. I like this one. The man came from the town and went to where the trees were. And he had gone from tree to tree to tree and asked, "Tree, may I have your branch?" He was looking for the right branch. And when the tree would ask, "What do you want the branch for?" he said, "Oh, I just need it to help me." From tree to tree, and the older trees, they said no. And they lifted their branches a bit higher. The trees that hadn't been there but only a couple hundred years, well, they said no. And they lifted their branches a bit higher. There were some trees that had only been there for 50 years, and they said no. And they lifted their branches a bit higher. But then there were some younger trees. Some of them had only been around 10 years. And some of them had light. They had liked it when the human children had played in them. They remembered, because it hadn't been long ago. They remembered how the children would climb up into their low branches and how they would climb and they would jump and run and how they would build tree houses. And they liked the humans. They trusted them. And so the man, going from tree to tree, finally found a tree who said, "And what will you use this for?" "Oh, to accomplish some things I need." And the tree, remembering this man's children, remembering how they climbed in the tree, and he did remember the time that one of them was in love and carved their heart on the tree. It hurt, but it was so sweet. And it was still there, and well, that boy and that girl, they would come back and they would lean against that tree, heard all their secrets. He felt like family with them. So he said, "Well, of course, I would be glad to help you." And he felt the pain as one of his branches was cut off, but he knew it would come of good. It was a few days later, that tree heard something. It was the screaming of another tree. He didn't understand. And then he heard the cut, cut, cut. Timber! Crash. Cut, cut, cut. Timber! Crash. That younger tree began to ask questions to the very old trees, to the younger than old trees, the middle-aged trees, and what is happening? What is happening? What is happening? And the older trees said, "It is the man. Someone gave him one of our branches." Well, I did. I gave him a branch. I remember the children. I remember his children climbing up in the branches, and I remembered the joy. I remember the picnics that his family had underneath me, and I remembered the two that loved and how they carved it. I mean, it hurt a bit, but they come back all the time. I gave him the branch. The trees, they looked at him incredulously. Did you not understand why he needed the branch? Well, he said he had something to do. He's been good. Oh, young one. He merely asked for the branch so he would have the wood to replace the wood that was broken on his axe. And the sound you hear is your own lifeblood taking the life of those who are your family. The moral is, be careful who we give our belief and thoughts to, or they might make something that makes it more difficult for us to live. And that is the axe and the oak tree with my own little things inside of it. Well, good. I hope this gives you a little bit of thinking and stuff like that. And I also hope that you're seeing how we can use folk tales and fairy tales to tell these amazing stories, and how we can connect with scientists. I can't wait to tell one of the last stories, because it's both of them are because of two scientists I heard that I get to tell the last two stories. But I'm not at the last two stories yet. I get to sing this story. And as you can see, I'm singing a lot too, just because I get to do it. So amen. All right, here we go. You might know this song. If you do, you can sing along with me. Here we go. The bear went over the mountain. The bear went over the mountain. The bear went over the mountain to see what he could see. To see what he could see. To see what he could see. The bear went over the mountain. The bear went over the mountain. The bear went over the mountain to see what he could see. And what did he see? He saw another mountain. He saw another mountain. He saw another mountain. Was all that he did see. Was all that he did see. Was all that he did see. He saw another mountain. He saw another mountain. He saw another mountain. I said, there's got to be more for me. So the bear went over the next mountain. And what did he see? He saw the burned down trees. He saw the burned down trees. Saw the burned down trees. As far as he could see. As far as he could see. As far as he could see. He saw the burned down trees. Saw the burned down trees. Saw the burned down trees. Well, this is not the place for me. I think I'll go over the mountain. And he did. And what did he see? There's no trees on this mountain. There's just roads with trucks. And they're taking the land and the dirt out. The bear saw a mine. The bear saw some mining. The bear saw some mining. And that's what he did see. And that's what he did see. And that's what he did see. The bear saw them mining. The bear saw them mining. The bear saw them mining. And said, that's not the place for me. So he went over that part of the mountain. And when he got over the mountain, what did he see? Lots of houses. There's houses in the mountain. There's houses down the mountain. There's houses around the mountain. More houses than I can see. More houses than I can see. More houses than I can see. There's houses around the mountain. There's houses around the mountain. There's houses down the mountain. Well, this might be the place for me. So the bear went down the mountain. Oh, it was definitely the place for the bear. Oh, because there were trash cans filled with food. There were pools with water that didn't taste really right, but okay. This was lovely. He liked it. So the bear went back over one mountain, back over the next mountain, back over the next mountain, and the next mountain, and told them, oh, there's food on the other mountain, there's food on the other mountain, food on the other mountain, and trash cans as far as I can see, and trash cans as far as I can see, trash cans as far as I can see. So let's go over the mountain, let's go over the mountain, let's go over the mountain, and eat it all we can, and eat all we can eat. But one of the younger bears said, well, why would we do that? We already have a river with salmon we can eat. And we already have green grass, and we have bees that buzz, and we have honey that's here, and we already have all the good things. Why would we cross a mountain, one that's dead from fire, and another that's cut down from mining, and one that just has trash cans with food? Why would we do that? And the bear sat the younger bear down and said, one day we won't have a mountain. One day we won't have a mountain. One day we won't have a mountain. They'll come here for sure, you'll see. They'll come here for sure, you'll see. They'll pollute all our streams. The honey won't flow on the mountain. The berries won't grow on the mountain. We won't have life on this mountain. They're coming for sure, you see. And the little bear just said, I hope not. And they stayed where they were. So, as you can see, that's an old song with just a new little feeling. I was in California and so I traveled the other day on Route 29, which takes you through Napa Valley. And there's a part where you get a top and you can just see mountain after mountain after mountain. And there's such beauty in that. And I thought to myself, could we possibly ever lose all those mountains? But then I think to my visits in parts of West Virginia, which I love, parts of Virginia, parts of Kentucky, even parts of Oregon that I've been to, where I see the felling of the trees. And I wonder if someone may have said at one point in time, we would never lose those mountains. But we did. And if you're saying I talk a lot about mountains, I do. I love the mountains. I love being in them. Even though I'm a sitting by the ocean kind of girl where I live at, I love the beauty of the mountains. And there's nothing that distresses me more than driving along and hitting that patch. Maybe some of you have experienced that place where you kind of turn around a corner on a mountain and the trees are being chopped down. There's stumps left over. And I wonder, how do we ever recover from that? Who else does that affect? It certainly affects the animals, certainly affects the land itself, that which can grow on that land. And I wonder, will we lose another mountain? Well, this leads us to this very important story. Now, I don't know if you actually saw it. It came on ACNN. You all know about ACNN, right, don't you? Animal Animals Central Network, the news network, ACNN. Yes, yes, yes. And they're up there with they love having the news, and they share it with all the animals. It is stunning. You all watch this, don't you? You don't watch the ACNN channel? I'm surprised. I'm, you just have to catch up because you missed it. You didn't see it? You didn't see the trial on the ACNN Animal Central News Network channel? Oh my goodness. Eva's just shaking her head. She did catch up. You just got to catch up. We all got to catch up. The animals have something to say. And, I was thinking about this the other day when I was sitting at, this is all true. So, please understand, I wouldn't tell you anything a lie, but I was sitting at my place in Berkeley, and I was outside, and this happened actually on Tuesday morning, and Monday morning. And so I was sitting outside. And then I decided just to sit in a little space, and on a little patio that was at my hotel. And I was sitting there, and then two birds. I was just minding my own business, and then two birds came over to a railing that wasn't too far from me. It's a beautiful bird, a brown bird with kind of reddish and a little red front breast, but not a robin redbreast. I knew that, smaller than that. And then another bird came, and it looking very similar, but you could tell they were, husband and wife. You could just look at them. They were obviously, and I don't speak a whole lot of bird, but I speak enough bird to know that they were having a discussion because it was very animated. That kind of discussion, which is usually, honey, you did. No, it's your fault. No, it's you. Can we fix this? I think you can fix this. No, you should fix that kind of argument. They were definitely having. Well, the argument ended. It was obviously the husband who decided to take control of things. And so he flew up into the ceiling area, which was a lattice. I always say that wrong. So if I'm not saying it right, Lattice. I always say it wrong. So lattice, I'm going to say lattice for the moment. So lattice. And so he flew up and I saw, oh, it's lattice, isn't it? And I thought, oh my goodness, he flew up and he is probably house hunting, because he's looking for a place to place his nest. And this would be a great place. I was quite impressed. I was like, oh, that's a really good decision. And then he flew back down, and then he flew over to another place a little further back. And I was like, well, that'd be a good one too. I agree. That would be a good one too. I agree with you, and such like that. Obviously, I was getting the wrong message. So he went back to sit by his wife, and his wife just kind of looked at him and tweeted a little bit and said, honey, you have to get this. And so she flew up into the lattice right up, almost up above my head, which of course concerned me for many reasons. But I looked up, and when I looked up, my head went all the way back, and that's when I saw their nest was right above me. I apologized. I was way too close to their home. And so I got up, I apologized, I moved away, and they went on and tweeted on and had another part of life. And I was amazed that the animals try to talk to us all the time. Sometimes we don't get it. And that's why I watch ACNN, Animal Central News Network. And that's how I saw the trial. Well, the reality is that lion was not the judge that day. It was bear who was the judge that day. And bear looked really good in his brown. And he'd even made sure his nails were sharpened perfectly. And he put on the desk that he sat behind him a whole honey pot, big enough for his paw to go in and give himself some nourishment, because he knew this was going to be a very emotional trial. And there they were. There was the prosecutor. The prosecutor, of course, was Fox. Fox always is the prosecutor. He's very, very good at that. And as the prosecutor, he also had some assistants with him. And those assistants were younger foxes. And there was a wolf also that was in that crowd. And they had their papers in front of them. And they had made sure that they had brightened up their tails completely. They were looking pretty good. And there at the defense table, there was the defense. Well, the only one that would stand up for the defense was Squirrel. The Squirrel Squirrel wasn't the greatest. He usually was about personal injury things, like people throwing stuff on top of you, like nuts or things like that. But this time he had no choice. He was required by law, by animal law, to every now and then step in and give free service. So he was called upon, Squirrel was, to sit and defend the human. The human was there because of the death of Woodpecker. It was known by the entire ACNN watchers and participants that the woodpecker had come to an end. As a matter of fact, when they announced it, they said the word extinction. The red-headed woodpecker, found in the forest of so many states, now gone. And the animals had no choice. Bear had no choice. And, those that rounded up the coyotes that went around and rounded up human and put human behind the bars, behind the bars that were created by Monkey. He was really good at putting jails together. And they brought him out. They were certain that human deserved to be on trial. He had killed one of their own. Now, I saw pictures of this, and I really did listen to the testimony that was there. You all may have been watching something about, a Supreme Court justice going on, and I'm certain, and that was good stuff. Yeah, I do, but I couldn't get my eyes off the ACNN. I was watching. And I watched as into the courtroom came a flock of birds, lots of different kinds of birds. Some I had never really recognized at all. And they were all aflutter when they walked in, without a doubt. They were tweeting to each other without the use of a computer or a cell phone, just tweeting, saying what needed to be said. And up and above, there were others. There were some animals that had come because, they had had their own extinctions. They now lived in zoos. And that's all you could find them at. So Bear came in and everyone stood, and Human stood on his two legs, and everyone booed. They were four-legged animals, or birds. The fish didn't come usually to this. They all watched the proceedings down below the ocean, and so it happened. And when the trial began, Fox brought up bird after bird after bird to speak about what the woodpecker brought. How the woodpecker helped to make sure that in the forest that there weren't too many of certain kinds of insects, and they didn't overpopulate. That even their holes that they put into the trees, that some of those holes that were put into trees would help the trees actually get the nourishment that they needed. Made them stronger. They didn't invite the trees to come in. Trees move so slowly. But they did get the deposition from them, and they read it into the court record. And I tell you, the bear, he sat shaking his head and every now and then throwing a look over at Human that looked like, oh, if you were a salmon, I'd take you out. Well, after all the birds came and the deposition was read, they brought up an animal, an okapi. An okapi is an animal with the fur at the top. It's like a horse, and it has fur like a horse at the top, but on the back it has the fur that's in stripes like a zebra. And they brought up okapi, and immediately Squirrel objected and said, what is the purpose of okapi? And that's when Fox said, well, okapi will tell you how they are almost extinct and in zoos, and it shouldn't happen that way. And the squirrel said, no, it has nothing to do with our case. It is prejudicial. And Bear brought up the squirrel and Fox looked at Squirrel and said, "If you don't let me have them up, I will eat you for dinner." Squirrel said, "Then okay, put him up." And Okapi was brought up and spoke about how his fur had been sought after for years and until they almost had nothing. And the only way that they were living was in the zoos. They couldn't even live in the wild. And Fox said, "This is what can happen to each and every one of us." But then it was Squirrel's turn. Squirrel didn't have anyone else defending Human. Human was brought up to testify for itself. And Human explained why they needed to cut the trees down. They needed the trees for housing. They needed the space for housing. They explained that they needed to put the pesticides out because they didn't want to have the insects near their own homes. And yes, it did get in the trees, and sometimes the woodpeckers would come around to where they were, but they couldn't have the woodpeckers pecking into their own homes and such, and they needed to be able to live and such, and besides, they were just woodpeckers. There's many other animals and birds in the air. It was just one bird. Well, when he said that statement, all the birds tweeted out. It was quite damning. At the end of the trial, Squirrel said all he could. The humans are just trying to make their way. Humans are just trying to do the best that they know how. And yes, they pull up fossil fuels and destroy lands and rivers and seas and oceans because of it oftentimes, but they're just trying to do their best. They're evolving, and they haven't completely adapted to finding ways to live on just what they find. And so they have to have more space to plant the things that they want. But that was the way of humans, and humans were put here to be in charge of the animals. There were several that were, I can't tell you, but there were several atheist coyote that got very upset about that. Finally, Squirrel sat down, and Fox stood up. And he looked at the jury that was made up of antelope and ants, roly-polies. It was made up of 2 seagulls, a pelican. It also had on that jury, several dogs who are known to be on the side of humans, but they also know human secrets. The fox looked at them and he said, "I can only end with this. Humans don't see us. And when they see us, they only see what they can use. They forget what we have taught them. Why, each of you birds, it was you who showed some of the humans how to fly in the sky. It was you, bats, who helped the humans to have the ability to recognize sonic sounds. It is you, some of you who have given even the Post-it note and to be able to grip things in the way that were made from your actual fingers. They forget how much they have learned from us. And they forget we exist and we adapt. And most of all, they forget that we deserve life. I ask you to find the humans guilty. The jury, they said, met for less than an hour and came back with the result. It was a hung jury. It was the dog's fault. The dogs were always on the side of humans, and although they knew the secrets, the dogs held out a hope for them. The bear sent them back in, but they couldn't come up with an answer. So the human was set free. And ACNN only reported later that it certainly didn't bring the woodpecker back. And there were at least 52 other animals, birds, fish, insects, that would soon die. And would the bear have trials for them as well? And what should have been the actual result? Are humans guilty or not? I want to thank Tiara Curry, who works with the Center for Biological Diversity, for helping me to understand the importance and the passion that so many people have about the animals. And she came to one of our Artists Standing Strong Together, used to have climate conversations. And we invited her, it was a time for scientists and storytellers to be together. And we had invited her to come in and share. It just happened to be on the day that they had put out the extinction of a notice about the extinction of the woodpecker. And I watched her cry, just cry over that, and felt that intensity. And I had to ask more questions because I didn't have that. I didn't have that kind of what happens if. And then she told me all the other things that woodpecker does in the ecosystem and what we were losing. And I thought, we need to have some trials. And if we are held to it, I wonder what the animals would actually say. Well, I'm going to give you my last story. Thank you for letting me babble on, not Babylon, but Babylon. So thank you so much for letting me share with you these stories. And I'm going to finish with my last story. And this also comes from a scientist, Lisa. I'm going to say her name incorrectly, so I'm just going to leave it at Lisa right now. Lisa Seghetti. But I forgot, she has a hyphenated name, and I forgot that part of it. And so this story comes from the scientific world as well. Old Man River, that old Man River, he must know something, but don't say nothing, 'cause he just keeps rolling, he just keeps rolling along. The river just rolled, and the people on both sides of the river, they loved to watch the river roll. They loved being in with the trees and the wildflowers. They even enjoyed the animals that were around. On both sides of the river, the people loved this area. They fished and they hunted. And when they left from camping, many a time they would walk away and say, "Wish I could live here." And Old Man River just keep rolling along. Until one day, there were some people that decided living by the river was not just a good idea, it was something they could make come true, and they bought the land by the river. And they came with 2 other friends, and so 3 houses were put on one side of the river. And so it was that there were houses on the river, but it was fine. This old man river just went a little higher on the other side, since they had put some fill at the bottom and raised it up on the other on the side where the houses were. He just kept rolling along until, well, some came from the other side. I know this might sound like a story about mountains, but it really is a story about a river. And on this side of the river, they also had houses. And in order to make sure that the river would move itself away, they had to move the river. And so they put some fill underneath their buildings, and they elevated their side, and they reduced how much the river had as a part of it. Indeed, and well, well, Old Man River had never met Albert Einstein, but well, probably Albert learned from him that one action always has an opposite reaction. And so Old Man River just floated back over to the other side. And the people there couldn't have that river coming up to their doors and into their basements. And so they put in a retaining wall. And make that river a little smaller, at least to them, and put a retaining wall to keep that river away. And they put more fill and organic materials under there. They changed the sediment that had always been there underneath the river itself. And well, Old Man River, he just kept rolling right on over to the other side. Well, the people over there knew they couldn't have all this, so they made a discharge place. They dug down and they created a large, underneath their house, a large discharge area so that the water would go into the discharge area and fill that, and then slowly go into the ground beyond the houses. And then to prevent even more, they made concrete linings on both sides of the river. Keep that river out. But the river keeps moving along. It keeps rolling along. And you see, a river doesn't just stop. A river's got to go somewhere. So the river went up and up. And soon it was too much for the discharge. And the concrete couldn't keep it at bay when the water came down and filled Old Man River up again. And soon, on both sides of the river, well, the houses were flooded. And folks looked out of their windows. They looked at the land that they had once thought was beautiful. And they grumbled. How can we get rid of the river? But Old Man River, he just keeps rolling. He keeps on rolling. He won't stop rolling. Now we'll be knowing he'll keep on rolling along. Oh. And maybe one day we'll understand the ones who have to move are us, not the river. Thank you. Thank you for letting me share tonight.